Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, former editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine and now CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media. Twice a month, we produce CIO Leadership Live with the generous support and help of my friends at CIO.com and the CIO Executive Council. We're streaming live to you right now on both LinkedIn and YouTube, and we really welcome all of our viewers who are taking the time to join us today to tap in with your own questions for my guests. We'll be watching for those questions and happy to pass them along. And today's guest, I'm very pleased to welcome, is a longtime friend of the CIO family, Don Goin, who is the Executive Vice President and CIO at Texas Capital Bank. Founded in 1998 and headquartered in Dallas, Texas Capital is a regional bank focused mainly on commercial and business banking services. It employs 2,200 people and holds more than $28 billion in assets. Don joined Texas Capital 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years next month, as part of a new senior leadership team that was joining CEO Rob Holmes to diversify and broaden the bank's products and services, and also to invest in a sweeping and significant transformation of talent, technology, and the digital client experience. Don brought a lot of great experience to this role. For the last 18 years, he has been leading large-scale technology organizations and digital transformations in banking and financial services. During my CIO Magazine days, we were lucky enough to have Don quoted in our pages and starring on many of our stages at our CIO regional events. And all that was happening while he was the CIO at Santander, a consumer bank, and before that, the digital operations officer at Capital One Financial, and before that, CIO of Capital One Auto Financing. Before he joined Texas Capital in May of 2021, Don spent 3 years working as a consulting CIO and senior executive advisor focused on technology consulting, staffing and offshore development issues, and managed services. And I, for one, am very glad that he has rejoined the world of big-time CIOs. Don, welcome. It's so nice to have you here today.
Hi, Mary Fran. Thank you. It's really good to be with you again after so many years.
I know. We've been making a really big habit of this over the years. Now, let's jump right in. There's been a whole lot of uproar in the commercial banking sector with the recent collapses of both Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. How is Texas Capital weathering this storm?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I know everyone has seen all of the news of the last 3 weeks. So I don't think it's my place to sort of give commentary on sort of what happened at Silicon Valley or what happened at Signature Bank. But definitely, in a rising rate environment, it does challenge banks and how banks are funded and sort of how we operate. But that for us, in doing this transformation, this is exactly the reason why we did what we did over the last 2 years. If we were just starting this today, we would be in a very different position, but we would have executed what we had already done starting from today in order to sort of weather this kind of environment.
Yeah.
So I feel very fortunate, very grateful for the leadership of our CEO, for the ability of our executive team and all of our employees to take us, as far as we've come over the last 2 years, such that we are in a position now where of strength in our capital ratios and our liquidity for the bank. We rank among the highest in terms of ratios across the entire banking sector, not just regional. So we are in a very, very strong position here, and we don't have the concentration risk that you see that you saw in Silicon Valley, for example.
Yeah.
With the tech sector and in crypto with Signature Bank.
Okay.
So we're intentionally diversified into a fortress balance sheet.
Excellent. Well, I know when we were talking before and getting ready for this interview today, you talked a lot about resiliency in the banking situation, but before, and we'll get into the tech transformation and all the kind of work you've been doing. But before that, is this another very similar CIO role to what you were doing at Santander and Capital One, or does this feel different to you in some way?
In some ways, it feels the same in that I tend to get myself into these roles, in these transformational roles.
Yeah.
So it is something that's attractive to me that I like doing. But if you think back to the credit crisis, 2008, 2009, the dynamics in the media and sort of what's going through, that does feel very similar. But what's different here, I think, is you've got somewhat of a historic opportunity because we moved the entire bank at once. And when you look historically at other banks who have tried to do these types of things, they typically end in an acquisition or something else happens, and we're doing quite well with it. And just if I brought you in the room where we as an executive team and our operating committee meets, think of like rotunda, 15 seats, 12 occupied, look in the eye of every single person around the room. Mm-hmm. You've got very experienced executives sort of at the helm who can run any bank in the country. Mm-hmm. And you feel sort of this is something special. There's something special happening here. Yeah. It's very different, perhaps historic in what we've been able to accomplish. And it's a real driving force to just being a part of something that it's meaningful, it's purposeful to communities, it's purposeful to business, mm-hmm. Certainly to our employee base. But it is something that I was drawn to initially. Yeah. When I got the call, do I want to step back in and do this thing again? Mm-hmm. And through, you could just feel that like there was something happening here that I wanted to be a part of.
So it was a different energy.
Very.
Yeah.
Very high energy.
Well, and your CEO has he's been interviewed a lot lately. There was a very good story a couple weeks ago in the Dallas Business Journal. And he was making the point in there that Texas Capital is the only full-service financial firm in Texas that is founded and staffed and everything. It's very hometown, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and it's hometown for you as well, because you go way back in Texas.
So I was born here, grew up here. Mm-hmm. I spent 4 years away when I was in the Marine Corps, but otherwise, this is hometown for me. So added to that, just for me as an individual, if you get the opportunity to do something like this mm-hmm. at a bank that's headquartered where you live, I feel like it's once in a lifetime. But yeah, so I think it's very special in that way too, being Texas focused, headquartered in Texas and hometown.
Okay, great. All right, let's talk about your marching orders. When Rob Holmes brought you in as part of his new team that was forming back in early 2021, and I've seen references to how right-sizing the bank and diversifying the balance sheet and all that was a part of why the bank is successful and well-positioned now. But how is IT part of right-sizing a bank for success? Tell us a little bit more about that. Sure.
Coming into it, we launched our strategy in September of 2021. I came in May. Wow. So we had some things kind of going, just assessing where we were, what we wanted to do, what the strategy was going to be going forward. So again, just very grateful being able to report to Rob, report to the CEO, and participate in the strategic planning so that we get in position to at the center of everything we're doing to make sure that we've got the digital landscape covered, we've got resiliency covered, we're able to move the bank forward, layer in more products and services, and do it in a safe, responsible way, and have strong risk management. So my participation in that, equivalent to all the other executives participating, is really to make sure that our technology foundations, from the frontline tooling as we put bankers out in market mm-hmm. to core transactional systems, and moreover, focusing on those digital experiences that we think are differentiating.
Okay.
Since we recapitalized the bank, we wrote down some hobby investments. Been very public and transparent about the transformations and the problems that we had to overcome. And so the marching orders are that we're not just trying to right size, we're trying to set ourselves up for growth at the same time. So it becomes really critical in how you do this, not just sort of what you're doing. So as we take step by step, we have to be sure that what we're laying down has a very long-term future outlook for the success of the bank going forward.
Okay. Well, one of the points you made when we talked earlier is that a big focus of what you've done is injecting engineering, software engineering, data engineering into the bank talent pool. Tell us, like 3 or 4 years ago, how was the tech organization structurally different in terms of talents and capabilities than it is today? What were some of the things that you did some pretty big changes on?
Yeah, it's a great point. It was a different operating model in the past year, where each line of business kind of ran their own strategy with technology and had some distribution out into the business. And majority of the work was done by third parties, so there wasn't really a core engineering capability in the bank. Past 2 years ago. So we did do that for the first time. Like, you definitely have tech talent, and many of them are still here.
Sure.
What we did is we enriched that with software engineers and data engineers so that we could get out with bespoke products that we develop in-house and make sure that we're modernizing our data platforms for the future. Like, a lot's changed. We don't do data today the way we did 10 years ago. And so adopting new platforms, new technologies. And so it's an opportunity to bring in new talent and also reskill and upskill some of the folks that are here who want to participate sort of in the new thing. But I think that's really the biggest differentiator in what we've accomplished in the tech part of the transformation is that core talent being able to deliver solutions all the way out to the client in the form of new products.
Yeah. No, and it's funny, as you're talking about this sounds very familiar to a story that I've discussed with CIOs at major size insurance companies and even some of the bigger banks. Is this unusual for a regional bank to be doing? Was that one of the things that drew you to this, is that it generally in the regional bank space, you don't find this kind of changeover to more of an engineering focus?
Yeah, I think you're right on that. In the regional banks, you typically don't find that level of in-house development. It's more just third party and commodity. But
sure,
we really are. We got very serious about being differentiated in the client experience to make sure that what we're offering, we can meet clients where they are in their financial life cycle. And then if they come to us and they're a smaller company, they can grow with us. So we have the strength of the balance sheet. We have all the tools and capabilities they need to grow their businesses over time, and they don't have to go anywhere else. And so we were really intentional on that front. And, if you look back to where the bank was in prior years, it was really more loan focused in the commercial space. But, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but the way we've transformed it, we have breadth of products and services out there now that we can go after. So we're just on all fronts sort of advancing the capabilities. But we do sit today with the launch of Texas Capital Securities, which is the investment bank, and the broker dealer. We have a trading floor in downtown Dallas, the only full services financial services firm headquartered in the state of Texas.
Interesting. Well, and some of the stuff you're saying and the idea of like building connected experiences for clients and all, that probably sounds pretty familiar to a lot of people in the audience. That, well, of course, there's lots of digital client experience. What is so different about being able to bring this into the commercial banking sector? Probably most of us regular human beings are used to having a certain number of these kind of services with our retail banking experiences. So how is this unusual in the commercial banking space?
Yeah, I think if the commercial side of it has been a little bit of a laggard on the digital front. Mm-hmm. You do see more of it in consumer, and there's this decade-long discussion around the unbundling of the bank, where the banking services start to get picked off by fintechs, mm-hmm. and you turn to other products and services to kind of fill the gap where the banks had historically been a little sleepy. And I think if you just have conversations, if you were having conversations in the banks back then, it would have been, that's not our frontline business. Like, let's focus on our frontline business. We'll just outsource the rest or we'll buy it. And the miss is really understanding that digital on the rise. You've got mobile getting in 2014, 2015, more people hit the internet with mobile phones than PCs mm-hmm. in the history of time. It never went back. It's not going back.
Right.
And so these play out very, very strongly in the consumer space. On the commercial side, there's an order of difficulty that's in play. Mm-hmm. Number one, and number two, you're not mass market like you are on the consumer side. Mm-hmm. And so your adoption across, once you get a mobile phone in your hand, you solve this two-sided market equation. You get a way to reach, millions of people with apps. On the commercial side, you're not reaching, millions. You're focused on the banking services. But when you take that idea of the digital experience and you put it into the commercial bank, it becomes a very powerful thing.
Okay.
And so, like one of the products we led with in the last year that we launched called Initio. This is commercial onboarding, and commercial onboarding is hard because you have complex entities and entity structures. Know your customer, KYC, know your business, KYB, the risk, mm-hmm. all the risk activities that have to happen, lots of documentation. But what we were up against was the way the bank had worked historically. If you wanted to do business with us, we would send you a bunch of paperwork, and you would fill it all out, and you would send it back. Then we go data enter it. And then you wanted to layer in treasury services. You wanted to do ACH, you want to do wires, you want to do positive pay, you want to do things like that. Then mm-hmm. more documentation, more paperwork, more manual process. Mm-hmm. And so we've digitized all of this. And even on the retail side in the branch, if you wanted to open an account, you actually in 2021 had to go into a branch and fill out paperwork.
Well, everybody would be masked up too, right?
Right. Yeah. So we've solved that, and we solved it through the talent that we brought in to drive those solutions forward. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know because your CEO has been, I always take a look at what CEOs are saying in the media in the month or two before I have a CIO on the show, and Rob Holmes has been doing a significant amount of talking about the technology changes you've made. He refers to the significant investments in people, process, and tech to make it easier to do business. And he mentions that our proprietary platform enables us to open new commercial and consumer deposit accounts within 24 hours. And that in commercial banking it's a big deal. It's the kind of thing you'd expect from much, much bigger banks. It's not you're not the first people in the universe to have done it, but in your space.
No. Well, actually, that's the bigger banks are more challenged in it. It's a more difficult thing for them to do because they may be encumbered by a lot of legacy through acquisitions.
And you had mentioned you didn't have a lot of that. Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things that worked to our advantage was, our core transactional systems are healthy, and it enabled us to get out from, middleware out in cloud native development opportunities to get these things in place with speed to market.
Okay.
Where we weren't encumbered by a large organization and we're not global, so we're not dealing with internationalization and multi-currency and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're able to get out to market a lot faster with a whole lot less money to develop the solutions. And so that has really played well for us. I think we're actually grateful that we're doing this as a regional bank, and we're not trying to do it as a large money center bank trying to traverse massive organizations and a lot of different systems to make this happen. Right.
Yeah. The size-wise, and then I've gotten that impression from talking to you that it's just a really good fit where you can have, because you've been at much bigger banking organizations, and there's only so much of the steering wheel you can get your hands on. But yeah. One of the things you said to me was the way we built things, the how is super important strategically. Let's get into more detail on that. You mentioned that the architecture is very intentionally to scale and that you don't plan on being the size you are forever. So talk more about that aspect of what you've done with the technology and how it's positioning the bank to grow more rapidly as needed.
Sure. When you said that, Mary Fran, it reminded me of a talk I did for you. I can't remember the date. It was probably would have been 2010.
Yeah, I was going to guess 2011 or 12. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did a talk that was titled "Thunderstorm in the Cloud."
Yeah.
And I got some weird reactions about that, but my message was, banking and financial services, the cloud, without a control environment, like this is something you need to approach carefully. Mm-hmm. And without standards like we'd had in other technologies, we saw this in the internet, we see it in the cloud, now we see it with AI. But we come a long way since then in our control environment where we can go safely to the cloud and operate in the cloud, and that's definitely sort of core in our strategy. And then when we build solutions there, we're taking advantage of modern architectures, and these architectures are built. They're resident in hyperscalers. They are in platforms that can massively scale more than this bank ever will. And so you're really in a really strong position to continue to grow on the platform, having these technologies underneath you. And this is true for data and being able to process data in place and bring it up and then API those out to a common client experience. And then as we build applications, these are all cloud native, they're all API based. And so you can see where we can take advantage of the interoperability in all the way to the client experience, out to a partner network, into embedded banking and other like services. And putting it all together, you're marrying up solutions that can scale, that can enable clients to have these experiences, whether they're small or large, and carry them through their financial life cycle. So we have been very intentional in our risk discipline, in our cyber and information security discipline, in the construction and the correct architecture to go. We could have done, hey, we're just going to do a point solution. We got to get to market fast. Don't worry about it. Yeah. We'll get to MVP 1. We'll worry about it later. And then you know how that goes. Like later becomes a really big problem.
Yeah.
So
it's like a temporary fence that it's there for 7 years. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I'm remembering, you mentioned being on one of our stages back in 2011, and I remember I've done hundreds of events, so this one really stands out in my mind because you got up and you were telling some of your colleagues about the incredible alarm you felt when there was a request, and I think it was from one of the marketing groups, and they were tapping into IT. They ordinarily didn't want IT to bother them, but they were tapping in to find out, how do we get into this particular customer database? And you were talking a lot about, all of that, probably shadow IT. I used to love calling it rogue IT, because it was people thinking, like marketing departments thinking that, oh, well, we can do this. Here, we've got a charge card. And I think someone had already signed up for a service. So I take it that it's a lot harder to do that these days in banking.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty much impossible these days. Yeah, the right control environment. A lot has matured over that 12 plus year period. But yes, it's very, very difficult to do that. But I do operate with the philosophy on data, for example, I really care less about which tools you use to go after data. I really care a lot about where you get it and whether you should have access to it.
Okay.
And so that's where sort of in the center of those controls come into play. Data governance becomes very, very, very high value and critical for data domain ownership, tying that all the way down to the data stores and who has access to them. So yeah, I think we do a much better job at those things at this day and age than we did in the past.
Well, and that's probably one of those things where we can all breathe a sigh of relief, right?
Sure,
But
right, yeah.
I think the reason that stuck in my mind so well is that it's so unusual to have CIOs in a position where they can tell you about something that they're really worried about. And you were able to talk about that, at our little conclave there. It was one of our regional events. Sure. Yeah. Tell me about, you had mentioned, of course, the massive investment in talent and in tooling up to do this. And is this all, has that gone toward building the Cortex platform, or was that one of the organic pieces in place when you got there? I guess I want to hear more about the Cortex platform.
Yep. So we had a lot of movement on talent across the entire bank, from frontline, standing up the investment bank and all the new talent we brought in there, and then back into operations in the back office and in tech. So when I got the call, just quick sidebar story. When I got the call for this, I really wasn't looking for a CIO job. I was fine. I know. This one was so compelling. I didn't even have the job yet, and I started recruiting my team. So I started making calls. They're like, "You don't even have the job yet. Why are you calling me?" Like, no, it's going to happen. Like, come on, we got to do this.
They're like, "What have you been drinking, guy? What are you calling me?" Yeah.
But thankfully, we were able to land very senior folks here. In short order. They left big jobs, big well-paying jobs to come do this thing. And even the caliber of talent you find in this regional bank is uncommon. And I think that is sort of at the center of success. And then when you cast out a vision for how we're going to build these solutions and what we're going to put forward, we do have a platform concept in mind. And so we built a platform that we call Cortex. It's inclusive of data and the microservices and API layers. These things carry across as a substrate across multiple lines of business. And then that gives you the ability to then launch other products off of it because you're working off the same platform capability.
Okay.
And so this is where we brought up Initio as an onboarding platform. We have C360 that gives us an operating plane across all the lines of business for the client experience that's featured, and integrated into call center and client management. And we can see everything that's going on with the client. We can see transactions. We know what's going on with them. And so this is very helpful when you're going from a bank that's more or less selling loans to now we are enabling services across the whole bank. So when we engage a client, we're out there with full coverage for every product and service, from private wealth to treasury and commercial to consumer to card to we have a healthy mortgage finance offering as well. And then the investment bank, if we want to do M&A, we want to do sell side, buy side, or syndicated loans or asset-based lending, swaps, like we can do all of these things now. And it's really powerful to get out there. But if you think about like the tech play in that, like, okay, now, so you started at a place where you're really just leading with loans. Now you're out, you're engaging the entire bank. I've got to make sure that platform is capable and scalable to manage end to end through the cycle for all of those products and services. And so that is sort of the idea and why we chose to execute on a platform strategy called Cortex.
And is this a broader scope for the CIO role than you have experienced before? Because you've had essentially 3+ very significant CIO roles in the past. Does this feel different in terms of the number of levers you have your hands on to control?
I've always been kind of an intense guy, as you know, and I've never moved this much at once. Ever. Like I've always been like someone who prides himself in like delivery. My teams pride themselves in delivering a lot. This team, unprecedented. Like it was a massive amount of movement across all fronts.
Wow. And so it makes you feel a little breathless every now and then. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a big hill to climb. And you can't do it alone.
Right.
Like everybody pulling in the same direction together. And that's from the executive team. That's the leadership of the CEO tuned into everything. And that's the technology organization, the leadership of the talent that we have here. Some who are still with us, through the transformation, who chose to stay, and some that we hired in new, like everybody together, just massively leaning in a purposeful way, because they feel engaged in this transformation journey.
Yeah. Well, and I had asked you too I always ask about whether the digital innovation, whether that's a carved out special group or it's something that is, the digital function itself. In some companies, there's a chief digital officer who's operating separately from the CIO. And you would emphasize that you haven't carved anything special out. So talk about that, about how, because you've made a lot of fast moves on the digital front, and you don't have a special group in charge of it. So how does that all work?
So I think it works as a function of the leadership we have in place, and that cohesiveness and participation on particularly on the executive team, and everybody working together. I think sometimes in organizations that digital group is necessary because you have so many competing priorities and you need some focus. Here, like that, building and owning our own client experiences was fundamentally part of our strategy. And so because of that, like it gets the right amount of attention and focus, and we're able to sort of lead out. But I think for fellow CIOs, there's a mechanism in there that I've used multiple times through my career that I still use today.
Okay.
Or a way of doing things, which is, in order to sort of get pace. So one is, as a leader, I need to synthesize the business and understand it, which I need help in from my peers. And then with that, I can anticipate sort of what's around the corner. And so couple that with bringing the right talent in that have both the business expertise and the tech expertise, we can lead out and go without a quote requirement session and get to a minimum viable product 1 or 2, and then start to refine. And that particularly when you're building new platforms and new capabilities, that gives you massive momentum and speed to market when you're empowered to do that. And so it wasn't something that we did, in a corner. This is participatory, in the strategy. Yeah. And so I think when you look back, it's only through the level of talent that we hired that we're able to achieve that in such a short period of time.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And tell us more about how you have the technology organization structured. Did you create entire new groups? Like, is there a data we used to talk about, what was it? Plan, run, and build groups. It used to be a lot simpler 15 years ago. So how do you have this all structured? So, because there's a lot of pulse points that you need to keep track of here. So how? Okay. So how do you have it structured so that you can do that and everybody's got that empowerment to move when they need to?
Yeah, I haven't thought of the plan, build, run in a long time.
I know.
Smile when you said that. We're primarily set up. There are really 2 fundamental operating models that I kind of settle on. The one I chose here, it's a product delivery model, sort of out delivering for teams. I've got engineering teams sort of siloed to me. So I have one control point. I control the entire tower, and then I federate them into the delivery teams. That's primarily kind of the structure and how we move. And then underneath that, you've got all your tech services, CTO role, CISO role, data. But we do see more and more convergence in the engineering space between software and data as data becomes more code.
Yes.
We do see like more synergies there. And so we have those lined up in the same function, but and then at the center point, you've got DevOps and SRE and things like that help that along and help the movement of everything through. So that operating model has worked pretty well.
And the SRE is system reliability engineering.
Yeah, the site reliability engineering.
Site reliability. Okay.
Yeah, cloud native concepts. We can template and build. We can build servers in minutes. Standard. It's not a problem. We've got tons of monitoring and cloud capabilities in there that gives us a high level of automation and sort of getting infrastructure out that's conformant to architecture. We have control points to make sure that we build it properly, control points to make sure that it's correct before it goes in production, and we've got security layered in there. So all that together, that operating model has served us well through the transformation to get a lot through the pipeline.
Okay. Does it? One of the other topics we've talked about in the past, and I know you've encountered this in other CIO jobs, where CIOs, a lot of your fellow CIOs will be familiar with this, that if you push into a product organization too hard before the business is ready, you run into all sorts of essentially cultural barriers. And you had mentioned when we talked before that one of the roles you created ended up being a kind of cultural touch point. Talk a little bit more about that and how you have steered around those pitfalls that sometimes CIOs can get into when the great idea is up and rolling and the business is saying, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where having some experience making mistakes helps you a lot, as you mature through your roles over time. And I've done this for a long time, since 2002, and I've seen every delivery methodology that's out there. I think so. I do have these experiences where if you're in a business and you want to get it product oriented, more like a software company, it is extremely difficult to push through in a product oriented way. Where if you have a business product manager with engineering teams attached directly, which is what you would find in a software company. Doing that in another business can be very challenging and culturally difficult. And so what we do here is, and I'm mindful of that, and so I tend to run more of a hybrid kind of organization where I've got some things running agile and some things running more traditional. And I like that, and I like a front end of that that's predictable to business, so that you can see, I have a thing, it's called a project, when it's going to end, when does it start, when does it end, what's the risk? And it's a better way to communicate in many organizations. Whereas if it's gone straight out for, hey, we're not going to do that, we're just going to do product roadmaps and drive it from there, not every part of the organization might be ready for that.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we do have some parts that do, some parts that don't. And then when we're running through the transformation, it is we knew it's essential that we communicate, and we over communicate. So when we got through our first round of modifications to target operating model and adjusting teams and getting new team formations, and so how we're going to do this, it's a little bumpy. So we kind of checked ourselves and said, okay, well, maybe we have to communicate more. So we did more. And in the end, we have formalized, 266 touch points across the organization in a given year. And that's not like me entirely. It's like the teams and everything that downstream that's happening. And so I think we ended up getting in a better place through the transformation and communication. And then even from the top, Rob, our CEO, is doing town halls, every single month, making sure that we're just as transparent, accessible as a leadership team. We're all in the thing together. We're all pulling the same direction. And so I think through and through, really amped up the communication over the last 2 years.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know I've had other CIOs I've interviewed has said that. They said, well, we thought at one point we were kind of over-indexing on the communication, and it
You can't.
turns out you can't. And you still do donuts with Don?
I do. Yeah. Goofy. Nobody eats donuts anymore, but
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Everybody's healthy, so we're trying to find another type of food that
yogurt parfaits with Don doesn't quite have that same wonderful alliterative sense of donuts with Dons.
But those are great sessions because they're unstructured. And so what we do is we assemble people across the organization who wouldn't normally work together and may not have even met each other. And we bring them in a room like 8 to 10 at a time, do intros. They get to talk about whatever they want.
Oh, there you go.
And so I usually get grilled. I get grilled on hard topics, which is fine.
Yeah.
I'll answer any questions I can. And then, it's great to make those connections with people and sort of understand what's on their mind and what they might be concerned about that maybe they're not hearing in other forums, and in an informal way, just pick up the learnings and pick up opportunities to connect. It's been very, very helpful.
When you're doing these touch points and meeting with people, does anyone look surprised or startled when they realize how deeply technical you actually are? Because that used to be very out of fashion for CIOs. Anybody who started out as a software engineer at Raytheon, and then you have to kind of mask that for a really long time because you're trying to make friends in the executive suite, and so it's all about talking in the business language and all that. And all of a sudden now, maybe not all of a sudden, but in the last few years, really understanding technology in a deep level has gotten to be a lot sexier in a CIO than it used to be. So how does that feel?
It's so funny you say that because early in my career I used to hide it. Like I would hide that I know how the technology works. I can read and write code. I can actually do that, but I would not tell anybody that.
God forbid they find out about that. The chief marketing officer. Yeah, exactly.
And true, like as a CIO, it's not where you want to be spending your time. Like I be very careful on where I choose to dive deep because time is precious. But I'm better served sort of out, meeting with teams and being present. But I can't just hole up in my office. But it is helpful. I think the more technical folks are, particularly as much internal software and data development that's going on in organizations.
Yeah.
Like to direct the work, I think you need to understand it. You'll make mistakes, or if you're not that person, it's okay so long as you've got people on your team who can do that, who are nearby that you trust to sort of guide it. But being more technical does serve well, I think, and particularly in the speed of decision making. And we're more conversational about it now. I went on a client visit a month or so ago, and this is a tech firm, and they had done business with us, let's say 3 years ago, and we were re-engaging with them, and they wanted to talk to me, which is common because they also want a reciprocal business relationship, and so they started asking me, well, what's different? And I just went unfiltered. Like I just went straight into, pure tech talk, which they totally understood. Yeah. Which was great because I could just,
you didn't have to stop and explain what an API was.
Yes. And we just went straight through, and they just looked at me like
who are
that
you?
Is just fundamentally different than any other bank we're talking to.
Okay.
Like nobody's that we're talking to is doing this. Like that is off the charts different and way different than where you were like 3 years ago.
It's so cool. I mean, being a nerd is cool again. So, I love it when it comes back into style. Let me see. Let me pivot over to, we've talked a lot about how you've been doing everything you're doing up until now. But when you think ahead for the rest of this year and next year, talk about what the most strategic business and technology priorities are for Texas Capital as you move forward.
Yeah, so we're trying to go now to next level of common connected digital experiences. And last year we had a strategic imperative around unlocking potential of data. This year it's more unleashing the value of it. in a secure way, which is really engaging the lines of business to drive more insight. And the touch point of that is when we drive the insight, remember, like, this is a modern data platform, so we can bring those insights right into the client in a self-serve way. So we're really after, we broaden products and services in the balance. You want to let, first of all, high touch doesn't always scale. No touch is not a great experience. We optimize in the middle. And where businesses want to come in and self-serve, like, we should let them do that and be really, really good at it. And so we'll be advancing on that front to make sure that we've got the right connected experiences that are differentiated, that are on par with any large institution you go to, but we're regional. And the advantage here is, we've got all the stuff everybody else has. We've got a fortress balance sheet, and we're local. You have local decision making. It's like nobody's going to New York to make a decision. No one's going to Chicago, or Boston, or wherever. We're here, and we're accessible, and the CEO is accessible, and we can help. And so then strategically, it is about the relationship. And by the way, like a relationship in bank, it's not about playing golf and take people to lunch. This is about understanding the business, and then being an advisor and a solution provider across the breadth of services, and bringing the whole bank to bear on that problem. We can digitally support that on the tech side too. So strategically, it's lining up each of those competitive differentiators and getting out to market with it.
Is it a real necessity to be able to operate like this when you're dealing with, say, younger founders of businesses, not necessarily baby boomers or even Gen Xers, but millennials and Gen Z, where there's going to be a certain Amazon type experience that they want from their bank. And a few years ago, they wouldn't have been able to get that.
I would actually barbell that, Mary Fran, because you've got, you have that, but then you also have an older population that have different needs. So let's take millennials. So we had some feedback recently on our onboarding experience. Had experiences in bigger bank, like best experience we've ever had. Didn't need training, completely intuitive. People you brought on were appropriately aligned and timed right, were able to help us the solution for the business. So, and these are millennial like business people. So you imagine they're experienced with that consumer facing stuff that you were talking about earlier. And I think there's also an opportunity for a population of folks who are more senior who have become digitally savvy, but let's say you're me and you can't see so well nowadays, and I can't see your stuff on the app on the phone. Can you make it bigger? There's opportunity for stuff like that too. I think they're both sides of it, right?
Yes, I know. I've been seeing it, and I don't know whether I'm noticing it more, but there's all these stories about how baby boomers and seniors in general are a lot more tech savvy than anybody believes.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the younger generations are believing that, but I always think, all right, let's surge onward. Okay, I want to pivot again and do like an emerging tech trends, the things that are usually I ask a question about the things that you are following and that are of greatest interest to you. But with the last couple of Leadership Lives, I've been fortunate to have a couple of CIOs on who, like you, are deeply technical. I had the CIO of Qualcomm on, and before that, the Chief Digital and Technology Officer from Equifax. And we played a game called "Is it hype or is this really happening?" So I've got like half a dozen topics to run by you, and to get your conservative, very serious banking CIO type call on these things. Okay, the first one, computation everywhere, essentially evolving beyond IoT, the Internet of Materials, where now we've got clever developers who are embedding smart chips into everything, cloth, bricks, wood, pretty much anything. Like the concrete in a building might fire off an email warning you before it falls. When you look at that with all you know about technology, is that hype to you, or is that something happening?
I think it's more, and listen, I'm not the expert on this one, but like, I think it's more hype. And I think there's a practicality part of that. Like if you relate that to RFID in every item that's in a convenience store, like that's pretty expensive to do.
Yeah.
And so the economics have to work out. And it's back to that two-sided market equation where like the market has to come, the tech has to come at the same time. Like how many times did you go to, point of sale where you want to do a mobile transaction or you want to do, tap to pay, but it wasn't available.
Yeah.
Or you had point of sale that got updated and somebody spent a lot of money, but the back end services weren't there. Like these things have to come together, I think. So I would say more hype.
Okay, good. All right, so that one's a hype. Decentralized finance, also known as blockchain. And I probably don't even need to explain what that is. The idea that the chain of transactions held in the distributed ledger can track insurance payments, car purchases, any number of assets. You being in banking, I feel like you're really going to understand and know this one. What do you think? Is blockchain finally happening, or is it still hype?
No, I think blockchain is happening, particularly around things like smart contracts.
Okay.
And distributed ledger, I think is when it involves the money supply, I think we have central banking system and monetary policy in play globally, and someone's got to custody that asset, and nobody wants to do it. So if you want to do a stable coin pegged to USD, maybe you could do that, but I think we're a long way out from a decentralized finance offering globally. So more to come, and just the volatility of it. I mean, you've seen the news, like you saw what happened. I don't have to replay that for you. Like it's problematic for sure.
Yeah. Okay. NFTs, non-fungible transactions. I really had to look this one up. And to be fair, these ideas all came from some of those end of the year pieces that talk about what lies ahead for CIOs and technologies and all. And so this one was about, the example was artists selling a digital right to their creation, sports leagues hoping NFTs will become the digital version of trading cards. And so the question is this an exclusive new innovation or a Ponzi scheme? So NFTs, hype or happening?
I think it's more hype, and here's why.
Okay.
Do you know, it may have changed recently, but like the most popular NFT-based website is?
No, I don't.
And so it's called CryptoKitty.
Oh, like is this cat videos?
No. So you buy a cat.
Oh.
And then the cats have all these variants that you can breed.
Okay.
And then you can trade cats and sell cats, and they're all NFT based.
Okay. Well.
Right. So that number one. Number two, the NBA did one of these things where they would do videos and then they would release these packages, and you might be able to snag a video that you have rights to, and if that NFT belongs to you, and then the media picks it up and runs it, then like you could get paid on it.
Right.
The issue is like I've used some of these things and tried them out, and like it is very difficult to use. Like you got to set up your token, you got to have a digital wallet, you got to run through all like it's not for everybody. and until a Chat GPT thing happens to NFT, I think it's nascent. Like it's a thing that's going to be hard to get adoption. What I do like though for a bank is consider that your modern day safety deposit box. Oh. And where better to sort of do that than a bank, like safe and risk managed. So there's a future where you can envision that as like I've got my NFT work of art. Like where do I want to store it? Because if I lose my crypto keys, I'm out. Like I don't have the thing anymore, and I can't get it back. Right?
Yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. Next one: quantum resistant cryptography. Which even this story about it said it was a pie-in-the-sky idea without a lot of practical demos yet. But what if magical quantum computing machines do start rolling off the assembly lines? How is there a new generation of protocols that will be able to resist the power of the quantum hardware? And I know that you're kind of deep on being a security guy. So what do you think? Is that hype at this point, or could it be starting to happen?
I think it's definitely hype.
Okay.
And these things take a long time to get in the mainstream. Faster than you used to and the whole Moore's law. And he passed away, by the way. Did you know that?
Yes, Gordon Moore. Yeah.
Right. The Moore's law, I think, can get shorter and shorter duration in cycles. But look how long it took us for internet adoption. Look how long it took even for cloud to become sort of mainstream and safe.
For IoT to have all kinds of Internet of Things, to have all sorts of
that's right.
real
and
applications.
So you get into quantum and compute power and energy consumption and refactor. I think it's more hype.
Okay. Well, the Metaverse. Metaverse has been taking a real beating lately. I've been seeing all kinds of, things dropping on it. How much hype versus what's really happening. Right now, it's essentially this article said, an undefined amalgam of technologies and concepts. It's everything. It's NFTs, it's augmented reality, cryptocurrencies, extended reality. I know that Facebook, now called Meta, would love it to become something real. And I even had a friend of mine who follows the retail industry saying that retailers that weren't staking out storefronts in the metaverse right now were going to be sorry that they were going to be missing out. So what do you think? Is it going to happen, or is it still in that hype area where we don't have to worry about it too much?
So I honestly think it's a little bit of both. Like, first of all, I think Meta, I think they missed it by 10 years. Like, I think they did it too soon.
Okay.
Personally, because it's just not there. My kids use these VR headsets. I think they give you headaches. But but I will say, let's say that you have a metaverse and you can buy property in the metaverse, and that crypto asset has value in the future. It could be today what domain parking was 20 years ago. Don't you wish you bought, CIO.com, right? Because it'd be worth something. Or, whatever the domain is. It's actually like you do a new thing today and you try and go find a domain. It's actually pretty hard.
Oh, it is, yeah.
All the common terms are taken.
Yep.
So is there an opportunity to land yourself on a digital asset today that you can, you shouldn't take it as something that's going to increase in value. It's gambling. So if you just take it and have it, it could be worth a lot 10 years from now if a metaverse happens. So there's a little bit of risk reward. So I'd say it's kind of in the middle.
It's a little bit of both. All right, good. Last one on my list. Decentralized digital identity. And this idea here is the privacy advocates are building these algorithms that will reveal just enough info that you can pass through your identity check, but keeping a bunch of other stuff about you secret. And then another version evolves in reverse, where the advertising industry, the old evil advertisers, right, will be looking for ways to stitch together all of the various pseudonyms that people use when they're online. And semi-anonymous browsing on the web will kind of go away. So that's the idea. Is that coming? Is that hype, or is that possibly happening? A decentralized digital identity.
So I love it. I thought about this kind of thing, when I think it's like homomorphic encryption, or you can pass keys and get something back without cracking the egg and seeing what's inside of it.
Yeah.
Pretty useful. But I think if you're talking about anything that's going to get into the government and your driver license program or your social security card,
that is really frightening. Yeah.
So unless it's privatized and then controlled, but I think something does need to happen for more digital protection. But I would expect that happens more on the device in your hand than it does anything else.
All right. Good. All right. Very good. So we had one that you kind of waffled on. You said it's hype and it's happening. 3 out of the 4 are pretty much hype, and then right on the borderline is this last one, digital identity, and then blockchain is finally happening. I lost count of how many CIOs I asked to come on stage and talk about what they were doing in blockchain, and all of you guys in finance for the last decade have been like, "Oh, we're playing with it in the lab, but no, we don't want to talk about it." So it's good to know that it's happening finally. All right, I have a wrap-up question for you. What have you learned about your own leadership style in the last few years? You've been a CIO 3 times, of course, but the last couple of years you were doing your own management consulting business, and now you're back in the thick of it. And it's probably been a very different experience in just this whole new job and all this excitement. So what have you learned about Don Goin in the last 2 years as a leader and a manager of men and women in technology?
Yeah, I think if I just play back over the years, more focus on people in leadership. Mm-hmm. I think I've in past years, I may have thought maybe that's, I'm not going to read a book on leadership. How do you read a book on leadership and go do that? And today I would read all of them because I think there's just so much learning in there. It's easy to know when leadership's bad. Like it's really hard to define. In the many ways it can be good. And so I think more focus on people and culture and sort of being present and being out and is more the fundamental change in me. Okay. And part of that came with, running my own business, trying to just live out on my own and not need anything else. Selling is really hard.
Oh, I know. I've just,
it's especially hard if you don't have a brand. And so you have to connect your kind of inner self in such a way that's different than being a CIO and riding the wave. So I think that's fundamentally more of it. And then, I'm much more measured at 52 than I was, at 32 when I started this thing. And so just take it all in stride, like everything will be fine.
Yeah. I love that idea. I especially love the idea that people really should read more. Because I feel like, that's what we could definitely, but I still get books out of the library. So, I'm very old school. I mean, I have a Kindle. I read things on a tablet and all that. But I just think you get so many different ideas in different worlds that you get to get into, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But a lot of the leadership books are quite well. Do you have a favorite one? One that you would tell everybody to read?
Well, there's one we're into right now called Extreme Ownership.
Okay.
Very good read. It's a Navy SEAL team that then went in consulting and business. You can draw these parallels on ownership. Mm-hmm. It's a good read. I did that one, Kindle and Audible. So I would read some on the Kindle, and then when I get in my car, I can pick up and then listen. Yeah. So I got through the book that way because I don't have time to sit and read it. But I'm with you. Mm-hmm. I prefer to smell the pages and flip through.
Yep. But I do that. Book. I do that same thing. I've at one point recently, I had a book I'd taken out of the library because if I read when I'm trying to fall asleep, I get there faster if I actually have a real book. But I also had it on my Kindle and Audible. So I was obviously really into this. And it's so fun to be able to go from one media to the next and just kind of a continuity with it. So thank you so much, Don. This has been such a great conversation. Yeah. And I know a lot of my CIOs coming into this say like, an hour? What are we going to talk about for an hour? I feel like we could go for another one, though. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, it flew by. Thank you so much. It's always good to connect with you.
It really is.
We can do more.
And good luck with everything you're doing at Texas Capitol. If we haven't convinced our watching millions here that you've got a great tech operation going on and that you're got your arms wide open for tech talent, then we had failed at our mission. But I think that maybe our mission is accomplished here. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Yes. And if you joined us late today, do not despair. You can watch this full episode later on today here on LinkedIn and also later in the day on CIO.com and on CIO's YouTube channel. CIO Leadership Live is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. As Don and I were just talking about, that ability to go from video to listening, you can do that with these shows as well. And I hope you all enjoyed and got as much out of today's conversation with Don Goin, the EVP and CIO of Texas Capital Bank, as I did, and that you'll plan to join me again in 2 weeks on Wednesday, April 19th, when I will have Justin Kershaw back for a return engagement. He is the retired CIO of Cargill, who is now working 3 different jobs. This is so much what retired CIOs tend to do these days. He is one one of our leading CIO Executive Council coaches. He's also a senior startup company advisor, and he's a member of a public board. So Justin and I will have a lot to talk about, as I find I always do. Thanks so much for joining us today, and please do take a moment to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, CIO's YouTube channel, where you can find all the previous episodes of CIO Leadership Live. So if you're desperate for something to binge, by all means, we've got over 100 of these wonderful interviews now. Stay well, and we'll see you here again next time. Take care.